for it. Welcome to Thinking Green. I am Rana, and as everyone knows, yesterday was Memorial Day, and traditionally I like to do a show around Memorial Day that gives a somewhat broader, different from either the commercialization of it or the standard patriotic activities of the day. So to that end, I have invited Len Raymond to be my guest tonight. Len did serve in Vietnam in the 1960s, and he has a presentation about his recent trip to Vietnam last winter. And so welcome, Len.
Thank you.
And I guess, you can start your slideshow at any time, but I guess maybe I'll just start and ask you, when exactly were you in Vietnam? And
From 1968 to 1969, and I actually enlisted in the service so that I would have a safer experience there. And I ended up being stationed at Tan Son Nhut Air Base, which is the airport for Saigon now. And I was probably in the safest spot in Vietnam. I didn't experience any direct combat myself, a few missile attacks from far away. So I had an unusual experience in that I wasn't facing death in the face, but I did feel an aliveness in the air. There was something palpable about the air in the experience. And I remember thinking, when I had only a month or so left there, how am I going to find this aliveness back in the normal world, which kind of represents the title I'm giving to this series, Restoring the Soul.
And back in those days, I mean, we remember it, obviously. I didn't have to deal with it directly, but Bob did not go, and it seemed as though everyone, or all males at least, back in the late 60s, had to make hard choices.
Yes. So I was looking at going to Canada, which some friends probably would have done. And I had flunked out of college, and I didn't think the war was right, but I did think our nation had chosen that. And maybe somewhat naively, I thought I should go there and perform service. And to be honest, as a young adult, I was looking for adventure as well. And I wasn't thinking how it would affect my life long run. And ended up, when I was there, I developed some Vietnamese friends, and I told them that I would be back to visit in 10 years or so. And 10 years came and went, and 40 years later, the opportunity came up. And my daughter, when she was young, I'd tell her stories, and one time I mentioned I was going back to Vietnam, and she said, "Oh, can I go with you?" And I thought, all right, but probably won't happen. And then she's in college between semester breaks and has the opportunity. So she and I went together. She was there for 4 weeks. I was there for 10 weeks. And do we have the slide up?
We can put it up.
I'm on live here.
We'll see it.
So, in any case, I had a friend who has been going to Hanoi for a number of years, and I'd always thought I'd go back to Saigon, which is now called Ho Chi Minh City. And since my friend was in Hanoi and is quite an arts center, I decided to go there instead to take advantage of his connections. And
so you had never been to Hanoi before?
Never. In fact, Hanoi was a dark place in my mind when I was there in Vietnam. That was the capital of the enemy. And it's actually a city of light. And it's often called the Paris of the East. It has a lot of lakes, and we see here one of the lakes. And this wasn't, it was maybe a 10-minute walk from where I was staying. And here we are the first night checking in with my daughter, and that was a very nice place, but it had a mildew problem, so we moved to another spot. And she wrote a poem that night. This is a haiku poem. I like to write haiku, and I encouraged her to write it. Pho, which is their soup, pho, coffee, and juice. Lighted signs shout out at night, a cool breeze at last. And after 1 week, we went to this place my friend had recommended, who'd been going for many years. That island there is where we were staying. And that actually is the lake which John McCain parachuted into when he was shot down over Hanoi. And I have more about that later.
It looks like a gorgeous place. Is it quite a modern city now?
Well, there are spots, modern spots here and there. If you can see on your screens, there's some skyscrapers here and there, but they're scattered about the city. They don't have a subway system yet, although they're building one. And so it's very modern stuff and very ancient stuff right next to each other. And this is the room I stayed in, a single room, which was very nice. And this is the view I had at breakfast.
That's gorgeous.
And that's looking out on the same lake. And here I am. That's the restaurant I'm at called Juice Bar. And they had a pretty simple breakfast there. And I'm told it's not there anymore. And this is a walk back I had from there to my room. So there's a lot of beauty in the city, and they have a lot of parks. And the one thing they don't have is all their electricity and phone cables underground. So this is a painting that someone made. And there are actually not that many stoplights in town, and everybody seems to take some picture of all these wires hanging all over the place. So here's a painting of it.
It is an incredible tangle of wires.
Yeah. And here's my daughter. When we arrived, we couldn't figure out how to cross the street because there's a steady stream of traffic, and there was no stoplight anywhere to be seen. And then we finally saw someone crossing the street, so we then learned how to do it. So this is a little video showing that. That didn't work.
Well, we got half of it. Let's try to get the whole one.
There we go. So the trick is not to look at any of the drivers. Just look straight ahead, and they avoid you. If you make eye contact, then they think you're trying to negotiate something with them. So we showed this video to our landlady, and she said, "Oh, not too crowded."
Well, you know, so I've heard stoplights being criticized as being like authoritarian. You know, you must stop. You must.
Right.
So this seems like the opposite of that.
It's anarchy, definitely. So I've got a little video now of exercise. This is how they exercise in the city, a low budget. And I don't actually know if the music's coming through. I imagine it is.
Now, is this just a public space that people gather in?
Yes, this is in a park, in a paved section of the park. But they have, here's a modern combined with the ancient. So this is called Top Gym. This is where I went to exercise. I paid about 10 times the fee to exercise there for 10 weeks than I would pay here at an exercise place. It's a lot more expensive. And this is a video of the place. So it has the same kind of equipment you'd see here at someplace like Planet Fitness.
But I'm guessing that a lot of people don't take advantage of this if it's so costly.
No, this is middle class, upper middle class.
And maybe visitors like you.
Right. There actually, I saw very few Westerners there. It was mostly Vietnamese, and here I am working out of the machine.
So this might be a silly question, but what languages do they speak, and how's your Vietnamese?
It's all Vietnamese. Oh, they speak, there's English, there's French, and Vietnamese, of course. And the Vietnamese has some accent issues. People in the middle country are hard to understand. So when they have TV shows, they actually often put Vietnamese subtitles in shows where the actors are speaking Vietnamese, because some parts of the country won't be able to understand the accent.
I guess it's not so different from if we watch like British shows. Sometimes it's helpful.
And so this is a place, a very popular park, and called the Literature, the Park of the Literature, something like that. And students like to come there and get their photos taken. So this is a high school graduating class getting their photo taken. And it sounds like they say cheese.
Now, you were there in winter, though, so they have graduations in winter and summer,
Yeah,
I'm
apparently
guessing.
they are on a different schedule than ours. And this one is them tossing their caps. And they have a person there coaching them all the time, like a photographer's assistant. So it's quite a production. And one of the things I'm struck by and getting to know them, they have all the same aspirations that we have. You know, they want a good world, they want peace in the world, they want to get educated. And they have a very international looking country. They're very aware of America and what goes on in America. And these are two university students that I met. I was at a park and they just came up to me and said, "Can we sit and talk?" I was sitting on a park bench, so we sat, and the woman to my left opened up a little notebook with 12 questions written in English. She'd ask each question, and then I would answer the question. And then they asked if they could come again next week, same time and place, and unfortunately I was leaving, so that wasn't possible.
So what kind of things were they interested in hearing from you?
Well, they're just interested in the world, having things go well in the world. I'm a student of restorative practices, so I would tell some of them about restorative practices and what that was all about. And I actually trained one person to facilitate a restorative circle with me, and we have a little bit of that. So.
And I want to remind people the phone lines are open and available if anyone wants to call in. If you also had experiences in Vietnam, if you have relatives who were there, or you have other questions or want to make a statement, feel free to call in.
Yeah, and I think it's important to have a silent prayer for all the people who have loved ones that were killed in the war, and families or friends traumatized by the war, or themselves. There are good reasons to be angry about our country and the war, or about Vietnam, whatever. There are lots of things going on for people. So this slide that's up now is some American friends. Yep. And they've been traveling the Far East a long time, so they educated me somewhat. And we would sometimes get together in the morning, early in the morning, for tea. And as you can see, we're bundled up there because it is cool in the 60s in Hanoi in the winter. And this slide is actual photo of John McCain being rescued. He's in the center of the photo. It's hard to make out, but you see the top of his head, apparently unconscious. But they're rescuing him.
Now, what year was that he was?
I don't actually know the year he was shot down. I know he was in prison for 5 years. So.
Now, were people really, I guess I wasn't much in touch, but were people aware of this, John McCain being shot down and in prison at the time, or did that just become very common knowledge later as he became active in U.S. politics?
He was a famous person in Vietnam. It was known that he had a relative that was high up in the military, so he was a prize prisoner for the Vietnamese, and they worked at getting him to make a confession, torturing him to get him to make a confession. And he did once, and then he never did it again. And when Ho Chi Minh died, about a month after he died, the torture stopped. And we've never heard a story on why that happened, but After he died, there was no more torture, allegedly, according to John McCain and according to the Vietnamese.
And how long did it take him to get released? You said he was
He was in prison for 5 years. Don't actually know the story. That was part of Kissinger negotiating with the Vietnamese, and it was a very complex negotiation. And this is the monument that's put up there by the lake where he parachuted in a little artistic rendition of a person in a parachute there. And McCain, when he was president, running for president, he went to Vietnam. Sorry, I keep going the wrong direction. And he had a photo shoot in front of Starbucks Cafe, and a lot of photos were taken.
So how do the Vietnamese perceive him now?
Well, I don't have a photo here, but the actual man who pulled him off the bottom of the lake gave him a hug, and there's a photo of that. And as far as I know, they perceive him fine. They really admire Americans, and is quite a strange phenomenon. If you ask them about the war, they say, "We forgive you, it was ghosts." And it took me a while to realize the ghost they were tactfully referring to was the domino theory. That is, if we didn't stop the expansion of communism in Vietnam, it would spread to all Southeast Asia. So, and I had one of my Vietnamese friends ask me if it was true, this domino theory, because she said they tell us never sure if what's in the history books is correct. So I told her, that was correct. We did have the domino theory as a driving theme.
Yeah, that was the justification for a lot of invasion.
Yep.
On our part.
And this is the Vietnamese version of Starbucks. There are maybe half a dozen Starbucks in Hanoi, but there are Highland coffee shops all over the place. And that's owned by some Vietnamese. And this is, if you've ever gone to Green Marble in Mystic, this is the equivalent of Green Marble, where they have, grind the coffee fresh. And Vietnamese is a great grower of coffee. They grow a lot of coffee in Vietnam. So, now this is one way you can do tours. This is an American or Australian, I'm not sure which, that owns this business. That guy standing up there, he just walked by, he's running the whole thing, and the tourists get a ride on the back of a motorbike, and Vietnamese drive them around to the city.
It sounds like a great way to see the city.
Yeah.
And did you do a motorbike tour when you were there?
I have not done that, although I got a taxi ride on quite a few motorbikes. Those are a lot cheaper than the regular taxis. And here we have a very cute photo. I just took it because it was such a beautiful shot. And this is one scooter. The two boys are standing on the scooter and two ladies on the seat behind them. And you see a lot of people packed on a motorbike often.
Now, I see a lot of people on scooters and motorbikes, some automobiles, but not a lot. Is the cost of cars prohibitive, or is it so crowded that the smaller modes make more sense?
The cost is very expensive. You have to pay double on the duty. So if you buy a car for $20,000, you actually have to pay $40,000. But with the trade deal the Obama administration has brokered, I believe that no longer applies. Now we'll be able to sell cars in Vietnam without a big markup on price.
I mean, it seems that there are some cars now that are, built in Korea or Japan, and
yeah, they have a lot of Japanese cars there, of people who have cars. And this is egg coffee. It's more or less a dessert. And I heard about that before I went. So we went and found a shop that had egg coffee, enjoying it there, my daughter and I.
So how do they make it? What is it?
Well, it's got coffee and egg in it, it's whipped up, and it's got cinnamon and probably some other ingredients. milk. There's milk in it. And my daughter was a friend magnet, so this is one of the many friends she made. People would just come up to her and introduce themselves and say they want to practice their English with her, and can we go out and do something after I get off work. So
now, you said that she had, years before, told you that she wanted to go with you. What was her motivation?
She just likes adventure. Yeah.
Well, it seems like a really exotic trip for.
Yeah, it was. Oh, she loved it, and I was blessed to be able to have her come along with me. So we were there during Christmas, and they're very aware of Santa Claus. They practice Christmas. In fact, Christmas Eve is date night. On Christmas Eve, there are couples out, or groups of couples out, all over the place having their little Christmas dinner of sorts, the Vietnamese style. And here, it appears they wanted to get a photo with me because I thought I looked like Santa Claus, or close enough.
Probably closer than anyone else around.
So we're waiting to get into a museum. And the museum opened, and more came up, more photos. So this is their war museum in Hanoi. And
before you go on,
yes,
with the War Museum, I see a little bit of what's there. Is there like a theme to the War Museum? Have they put it behind them? Do they want people to remember?
Well, this one, I hear the best one is actually in Saigon, now called Ho Chi Minh City. But this one has a lot of captured equipment outdoors, and as a giant sculpture made with parts, war parts, like parts of a tank, parts of an airplane, and I should put that in my slideshow for some other time. So they do have the history of what's going on socially, but the American anti-war movement got very little mention. It was mentioned, but there was no depth really to their reporting on history. It was just little artifacts or vignettes here and there.
Now, at the time, back in the late 60s and early 70s, do you think the governments were really aware of the intensity of the anti-war movement, both within the U.S. military and at home?
That's a good question. I don't really know. There wasn't CNN going around the world then. So
no, and Voice of America probably wouldn't be reporting it.
And the North was very poor at the time. So if there was a TV, it'd be one TV for the whole village. And this is my favorite food. It's some noodles with a whole assortment of vegetables and with beef, or it can be gotten with chicken. And here's a poem I wrote, Soups, Shouting Balance, Establishments Testing Mess, Old, New, Tasty, Fresh. The country is quite a mix of old and new. They're very modern in a lot of ways, and their thinking is very modern, but they're a third world country still, and they have a lot of old buildings, a lot of poverty, things like that. So here we have Christmas dinner right before my daughter went back and the woman in the red shirt and the man to her left, they're brother and sister, and they own this establishment, and they are amazing hosts. She would invite my daughter down to their kitchen from time to time and show her how to cook some Vietnamese food, and I was very lucky to have them. And this is a characteristic of everybody, it seems. They're very warm to other people. During the war, to survive, they really need to be as a community. They had to rely on each other because there's so little transportation, so little of everything. It's very hard to get anything done. So they perhaps, as well as any country in the world, or perhaps better than any country in the world, know how to do community, know how to have a bunch of people work together to get something done. And she would, when people come, to rent a room there. They had about 5 rooms. If she liked them, she would say, yes, we have room. If she didn't like them, she'd say, sorry, we don't have any room. So she wanted people that would participate in their community. It was a beautiful thing.
Sounds like she was sizing people up pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah. And this is my friend, Dan, who's been coming to Hanoi for many years. And we went to this nostalgia restaurant that celebrated the war years. So in this restaurant, you get food that they had during the war. And up on the walls and around the room, they have various artifacts that existed during the war. And they had food stamps there. And this woman came to enjoy it, as she seemed to describe it. She was stationed, she was she was young during the war. So she's just remembering her childhood. And I actually have this is a video of it here. And she's noticing this sewing machine, the base of a sewing machine.
Wow.
So it's very costly at that time.
Yeah. Amazing. What a beautiful equation to make between gold and sewing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And 6 seasons of morning glory.
Yep.
And we have it's
And no
like
electricity
3
needed.
It's a yeah. It's how big is it? It's about 300. It's about 200 square meters of the pond where we grow morning glories, and we have to work on that for 6 seasons.
I think you should give
It's
a lecture
been
to
almost 2 years in order to save money and buy that sewing
Did
machine.
you know?
Now this is one of the things I found remarkable. I know people get angry and happy and all those things, but that they would wax about their history just like we would here in our country. It was amazing. And that was quite an enlightenment for me.
Yeah, that's kind of amazing to me too, the idea of nostalgia, because we know, I don't know if this country has really totally recovered from our involvement there, and yet they must have been much more intimately impacted because it was on their land.
Well, and I've talked to them about it. They say it was 50 years ago. Half the people there weren't born when the war was happening, and they moved on. And also, they have said they forgive us for the war. And a little bit later, I'll talk about this gentleman, Chuck Searcy, an American, who has more to say on that. And so this shot is a cafe where I did a little circle with some Vietnamese and this woman I trained on facilitating a circle. Kong Cafe means Communist Cafe. And these people here, the 3 older people, they were all there during the rescue of John McCain. The man in the back was a policeman, and the woman there, I believe, was on the shore, and the man at the bottom, I believe, was in the water helping rescue him. And the woman above me is a Vietnamese woman that I taught how to facilitate a circle. So this is just a little bit of chat we were having after the circle. And
Ông này là ở 12 tỷ đồng. Ông là lính chạy hàng người Trung Quốc.
Bây giờ ông ấy còn sống không ạ?
Chết năm nào này.
And they're looking at the photos I have.
Do you think that looks authentic?
Đấy.
Is that really of the event?
And they were
Một là
reminiscing
Mỹ
with
chụp.
each other about what happened.
Hai là
Nhưng mà
cái
ảnh
ông
này
Lưu chạy hàng.
mà đúng là cái sự việc xảy ra đúng không ạ?
Đúng rồi, đúng rồi.
Đúng rồi. Đúng.
Yeah. They all agree. And she knows the photographer.
Oh.
He's from China, but he passed away already.
Ah, okay. Interesting. So the arrow keys will move to the next one.
Đấy, ông này này, bác
Bác biết bác này đúng không ạ? Bây giờ hình như bác qua đời rồi.
chết rồi.
Vâng.
There's the man
Đây là
that
cái lần mà
rescued John
một
McCain
trong
we
những
saw
lần mà John
briefly.
McCain quay lại thăm Việt Nam thì lúc đấy là có
That's Mr. An.
bác
Yes,
An
since
đúng không ạ?
died.
An Anh.
Đấy, nhà ở Mục xã đấy, nhưng mà ông chết rồi.
And then
Đây
there's
là
some
cái
Đấy
interesting
là
details
cái
about
biểu tượng.
him
Mm-hmm.
and the monument
Yeah.
that
You know that.
was going to explain.
Okay. Yep.
Đây là cái ảnh mà trong một lần John McCain quay lại Việt Nam.
Đúng rồi.
Tức là đi qua cái
Đi qua
bia này.
Ông đề nghị là bỏ,
Ông đề nghị bỏ
đề
luôn.
nghị bỏ,
Thế ạ? Xong rồi nhà nước mình không bỏ.
không bỏ,
Ông bỏ.
ông đề nghị bỏ đi.
Ông mà bỏ đi ông cho 1 triệu đô.
Tức,
À,
ông
thế ạ?
tức không được làm cả.
Ông mà bỏ đi ông cho 1 triệu đô nhà nước Việt Nam.
Bác có nhớ là ông đề nghị bỏ cách đây bao lâu không ạ?
50 cách
Cái
đây
đây
đến năm.
cũng khoảng độ-
Ôi sang thăm lần đầu tiên ấy.
lần đầu
Lần
tiên
đầu tiên chả biết là năm bao
In
nhiêu.
the first time he visited Vietnam again
ông
after
đề
the
nghị
war,
bỏ đấy.
he suggested Vietnamese government to remove the monument,
Oh.
but the government disagreed. He got really angry.
Ông mà bỏ đi ông cho 1 triệu đô.
He said that he would give $1 million US dollar if the monument was removed, but the Vietnamese government rejected the offer.
Ông này là ông Ken à?
Len ạ?
Len.
So it might be hard to understand her accent, but she was saying John McCain asked them to remove the statue,
Oh,
and he said he would pay the government $1 million if they did that.
really?
Yes, that's what they say. I don't have confirmation.
But it's still up there.
It's
so
still
they-
up there. The government declined that offer. And this is Chuck Searcy on the left. In the center is a Vietnamese veteran of the war, the American War as they call it. And Chuck Searcy is also a veteran. He has the Vietnamese chapter of Veterans for Peace, the American organization, Veterans for Peace. And he went back to Vietnam and has been living there for several years to head up removal of mines. So he organized a whole program to remove mines that are out in the farmland. And there's a whole system now where people discover a mine, there's a certain number they can call, and there's a group of people that will come out and deactivate the mine and all that.
So now, 40, 50 years later, there are still mines and
It
as
doesn't
kind of
happen
a-
too often,
a
but there are
legacy.
still some. But for a while there are many, many people being killed every year running into mines.
So even after the end of the war, the damage
Right.
continued.
Yeah, and then it's also continuing the form of children are sometimes born with birth defects, and the Agent Orange had a chemical in it that's known to cause birth defects. So another person who's a veteran, George Mizos, started a thing called Friendship Village, which is where we were. And Friendship Village is for people who've been injured by Agent Orange. And we have a short little video here of Chuck. He speaks Vietnamese fluently, talking to students in the classroom at Friendship Village.
Chào, làm rất giỏi, giỏi lắm.
Mày cũng cái chân ngoài cốt cái chứ tôi cái chân đấy.
Bởi vì
Tôi lấy được.
đây là người chuyên nghiệp đúng không? Định rất giỏi, rất nhiều.
Chuyên gia ngoài là
Chuyên gia đúng rồi.
ngoài là
And here we have smog. They don't have as bad as in Beijing, but it's a pretty serious problem. And it's also pretty bad in Ho Chi Minh City, although I understand it's a little bit worse in Hanoi. And there are a lot of people that will wear masks. I would wear masks some days. Some days I was affected by the air.
Now, is it worse in summer yet than it is in winter, or?
I actually don't know what time of the year it's bad, but it's, any day when there's not much wind. So this is some ancient art, the Divine Eye Sphere. And here we have modern art. And here, this is a video I have of my daughter and I biking out in the countryside. Very beautiful. In fact, there's incredible beauty in Vietnam and lots of variety. There are mountains, there's seashore, there are beautiful beaches, and the food is incredible. Anthony Bourdain calls Vietnam his favorite country, and his favorite food as well. So I was struck by the beauty of this place. The mountains just pop right up out of the rice fields, and the rice fields are just completely flat. So you stand on the edge of this expanse of rice fields that looks like you're on the edge of a lake, except it's a lake you can walk on. So it was kind of jaw-dropping. So, and here we have a rooster. I just couldn't resist this one. And that was the place we were staying at for our one night, actually, that we were there. And while we were there in the evening, the locals had a little thing going on. I think it was an engagement party. My daughter had actually done this dancing in her school, their school, so she joined in with them. And there were other Westerners that joined in. They encouraged us to join them. And this is a great shot of the rice paddies, and I wrote a poem about this that I think, well, for me, captures the feeling I had about the country more than anything else. Paddies bathe the shore, soul awakens, mountains strut, biking rooster crows. And this is the last slide. And I find it an incredible country. They have a lot of good things going for them. The one thing that they're missing is a government with any semblance of health. It's a one-party system. They have abandoned communism. They call themselves a socialist country. And in the 1980s, they started allowing market economies because they couldn't manage the economy well. And
we're going to lose the slides now because.
Okay.
So I was going to ask you that, as a matter of fact, because I saw there were signs, of course, with chain stores, and yet there was the Con Cafe. What, how they had balanced, their communist past with what seemed like a lot of free market activity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Oh, we're just having some small little practical issues with all the wires. So now it seems that there's a lot of free market economic activity.
More computer problems. There we go.
Okay.
Yeah, and their economy has been growing 10 years, 7% or 10%, between 7 and 10% for the last 10 years. Well, since 1982, so that's more than 10 years. They've not had a recession since then. So they're happy about how things are going, so it seems. However, the government is bad news. We wanted to have the person who was at the circle, the young woman, she wanted to bring a friend who I believe is a history professor. And at the last minute he canceled because he was afraid to have a video done. He was afraid of what the government would do. Another friend got interviewed by the government because he got mentioned on a Facebook page by another Vietnamese woman. And the friends where he was staying got very afraid. So my friend John left the country, went to Bangkok for a while, just so his friends would feel comfortable. People have disappeared for opposing the government. You can't do that at all. And they call themselves a socialist country, but they don't provide any social welfare yet. Everyone has to pay for their own medical expenses. And they say as soon as the country gets profitable enough, they will then have medical coverage. And there's been some signs that the government's loosening up. They have the Communist Party that kind of runs everything, and the legislature that's elected by the populace. But the legislature in recent years has actually done real debate on issues, whereas in the past it used to be they just did whatever the party asked them to do. And there's a bauxite area of the country where there's a lot of bauxite that's used for making aluminum. And they're working very hard, it seems, on trying to go about that the right way. They actually found somebody on LinkedIn, an American on LinkedIn. They hired him to come over to Vietnam and serve as a mediator between the villagers in this area where they're going to be doing the mining and the company that wants to do the mining and the government. So that's a pretty forward-looking thing. However, it's a one-party system, and they don't deal with corruption very well.
And so there doubtless is quite a bit of corruption there.
Maybe not as bad as other countries, but there is corruption. A good indicator is I have a friend whose son is a doctor and is part of Doctors Without Borders. I think that's the organization, and they travel from country to country. They went to Vietnam, and their equipment went through customs without any problems, and they were expecting they'd have to pay a bribe to get it out of customs. Virtually every other third world country they go to, they have to pay a bribe to get the equipment out of customs. So that's a good thing. On the bad side, I heard of someone who was going to college in the States and had a $30,000 scholarship, and he had to get approval to leave the country, and the minister who was giving the approval was meeting with him and asked how much his scholarship was, and he said $30,000. He said, well, it's going to cost you $15,000 to get the visa to leave the country. So that's one example of corruption. Another is they're building the subway system, and a whole lot of officials were caught skimming money off the construction project. And this is being built and financed by the Japanese. So the Japanese shut it down, said, we're not building this anymore. And then the government somehow negotiated with the Japanese and worked out some system where the corruption won't be happening. So it's a mixed bag, but it is corrupt.
And it sounds as though there's a lot of authoritarianism still.
Oh, there is.
In spite of the socialist label, which doesn't necessarily mean it's got to be that way. What I want to ask you, I think we have like 7 or 8 minutes left, is, if people are watching this, and what kind of response would you like to see here from people who really might not have known much about this and are seeing it?
Well, I think the best is to be a witness to the pain people have connected to the war. It could be any kind. It could be upset that we didn't win the war, or it could be that you have a relative or a friend that died there, or it could be have a friend or relative that suffered PTSD, any number of possibilities, but just be a witness to their struggle. Many Americans actually go back to Vietnam seeming to repair some harm or reach a reconciliation with their past. And this reminds me of one story Chuck Searcy told me. An American went to Malai. That was our big abusive massacre thing, the worst atrocity that happened during the war on our side. And the Vietnamese had their worst atrocity also. In any case, he met a woman there, an elder woman who actually was there during the massacre. And they talked a long time, and she told him that she forgives him. And she said, also, we forgive you, you know, speaking for the country. And she said, you now need to forgive yourselves. And I think there's an American struggle we have, first to recognize perhaps some pain that we have over it, and second, to forgive ourselves. It does seem like a war fought for no reason. We didn't accomplish anything of value. And there was a lot of harm that happened. So that's one of the things that struck me in going to the North. I got to see and hear about all the harm that happened and be struck by how they forgave us. One person told me, we saw a picture of him in that Christmas dinner. He told me that it was in the past, it was a long time ago, and it was ghosts that caused the war. And it took me a while to realize what the ghosts were. The domino theory, I think I mentioned that already, right?
So, and we're down to about the last 4 minutes, but you know, there are people here in the United States too. You mentioned Agent Orange, people who still have health effects here and there. You know, what can we do to, I don't know, set a different path for ourselves in the future? It seems as though the pain that goes along, whether it's we inflicted on others or it's inflicted on us, it's 50 years and we haven't gotten past it.
Well, one thing that the Quakers are working on, they have a lobbyist group in Washington, D.C., and they created this document called Shared Security. And they're working on the notion that the way to bring about peace, or a powerful force in bringing out peace, is take responsibility for the other person's security. Make sure the enemy, so to speak, feels secure. And if we all nations did that, made sure other nations felt secure, no matter who they are, we could achieve peace that way.
And you know, you're mentioning of the Vietnamese kind of having built a society in which there's a lot of sense of community. Seems like there's a lesson in there that we could learn from it.
I strongly recommend traveling to Vietnam. It's a beautiful country. When my daughter and I were on the way, you know, we'd be in a limo with other people or a bus, and we'd all share where we're going. And when we say we're going to Vietnam, we'd get responses like, "Oh, I've been there. That's the best place I've ever been," or "I know someone has been there. He just described it as quite a thing." So internationally, it has quite a reputation, and it's one of the top 10 destinations for world travelers.
Now, you waited almost over 45 years to go back after you had been there in the 60s. Mm-hmm. Do you have any more trips planned? Or
I would like to go back to visit Ho Chi Minh City.
This time you didn't get to the south part of the country at all.
No. And then there's just traveling along the coast and in the mountains and in the highlands. It's just beautiful country. There's just so much beauty there. And then they have 52 ethnic minorities, so there's just a huge richness of culture.
So maybe in a couple years you'll be back with your show from the second trip, the Ho Chi Minh City and that area.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. That was fascinating because, you know, I lived through that period from a very far away, and it's always seemed exotic and distant to me.
Well, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Well, I'm glad I did. I have one quick announcement. This weekend is Trails Day weekend, and check the newspaper. There are a lot of walks and hikes going on in Connecticut, in New London, and other cities nearby. Check it out and come see some of the beautiful spots we have in our own backyard. Next week, our show will be about this year's Juneteenth celebrations. Jean Jordan and Aileen Novick will be on to talk about that. So we'll see you then, and thanks again, Len.
Okay.